I've been up on stage a number of times with doing dramas or presentations, and honestly, that is a million times easier. Never been nervous up there, but today it's a whole different ballgame. Up there I have a script, I've got fellow actors, I've got Rita to lead me, and it's a lot easier. Down here I'm just me, I'm vulnerable, I've got flaws, I don't even have an Excel spreadsheet that I can talk to that takes everyone's attention away from me. What I'm going to talk about this morning, or what I'm going to introduce, is something that's very personal to my family, to me, and I'm guessing we're probably not the only ones. There's probably more than one of you here who will also be able to relate to the stories. So I thought I would start with some very interesting passages from Ecclesiastes. There we go. The first one is Ecclesiastes 1:2. Everything is meaningless, says the teacher. Completely meaningless. The second one is Ecclesiastes 2:11. But as I looked at everything I'd worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless, like chasing the wind. There was nothing real worthwhile anymore. Then Ecclesiastes 6:12. In the few days of our meaningless lives, who knows how our days can be spent? Our lives are like a shadow. Now, did you happen to catch a common theme or word up there, maybe? It's not rocket science. This was me. If there were ever Bible verses written for someone, those would be mine. It's like if you went to the concordance at the back of the Bible and looked up meaningless, there'd be a little picture of me with a bunch of references to Ecclesiastes. Now, I remember the first time that I heard these words spoken. When reading them, they didn't mean that much to me, but I was mowing the lawn at our last home, the big money pit on the corner, and I was listening to a podcast by Erwin McManus. He's a preacher or a pastor out in LA. And he was talking, and his words just hit me. And I'm mowing the lawn, and I start to tear up. I'm glad no one was driving by, and it was so powerful to me. It was like putting a face to a name, but for me, it was like putting words to a feeling. And that's always something that's been really hard for me, is talking about my feelings. I can talk to a bunch of people, but one-on-one, I'm terrible. So there were words that I could feel. Now, Erwin was talking about how these verses were written in the book of Ecclesiastes by the wisest man who had ever lived. It was King Solomon. And imagine him, the wisest man who had ever lived. He was the most powerful, richest, strongest king. He had thousands, millions of followers, 1,000 wives. He had taken over pretty much the whole known area of that time. And he was struggling like this. It must have been just deep, heart-wrenching struggling. And I knew that day while mowing that if Rob and Gordon ever did give me the chance to preach or talk or do an intro, that it had to be about this, that my first time I wanted to talk about Ecclesiastes and struggles. Now, I said these were my verses, but I would guess that many of you could probably relate to what Solomon was thinking. It wouldn't be just he and I. So I'll tell you a little bit of my story. Back in 07 and 08, I was struggling pretty hard with depression and anxiety, and it really made no sense to me. Like I said, I was an accountant, so it's either black or white. I'm learning more, there's more to accounting than black and white. But it made no sense to me. I had a great life, a beautiful wife, 2 healthy kids. We just bought a huge house, which ended up not being so good. We had a ton of friends. Work was going great. Everything was great. But it was only great on the outside. And I could not figure out what was going on, why I was so depressed, why I was so upset. I felt weak. I felt like a child. I felt like a failure. To me, on the inside, everything was meaningless. It was hopeless. I couldn't find joy in anything I did or achieved. And as that second verse that I read said, as I looked at everything I'd worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless. I was feeling hopeless, like life had no purpose. You know how you set goals for the future, like in 5 years I want to be here, 10 years I want to be here? Well, I couldn't see 5 years. I couldn't see a future. I couldn't see my kids graduating from school or getting married or growing old and retiring with Danina. I couldn't see a future that really included me. And things just started getting weird. I was always down. I put on a good face and go out. But in my head, I had thoughts of suicide, like jumping off the bridge or driving into Lake Binook or slamming into a pole. You know, I never really thought I had the guts to do it, but it was becoming more and more and more real. And I was starting to get really scared. Really scared. I didn't tear up at home in the bedroom. One night I was driving home from a golf tournament, and I just broke down. I guess you'd call it a panic attack. You call it spiritual attack. I had no idea what it was. I was on the other side of Halifax. I was way up by George's house, so you know how far that is. And I knew I couldn't get home. There was no way I could get that car home. I tried calling Danina, but she was out, and my parents were watching the kids. And there was no way I could talk to my parents about what was going on. I was too embarrassed. And I had a migraine headache so bad that I could hardly see, and it was dark and rainy, and I was pulling over every 2 or 3 minutes to get sick, and I knew I was in trouble. Now, probably looking back, I probably wasn't in that big of trouble. I could have stopped, driven to somebody's house, but to me, the world was ending. I just wanted to be home and be safe. So I finally gave up, called my dad, and between tears, I finally got, I need help out. I said, get an ambulance up here to meet me, and I'll meet them. I said, probably irrational, but it was the only thing I figured that would help, and it was the quickest way to get help. And I didn't know where the car was going to end up. So I spent the rest of that night in the emergency room with my dad and Danina, just being humbled, trying to get settled down on an IV for the headache and just trying to relax. And then, of course, my stubbornness, the next day, I'm fine. I said, everything's great. I've got no problems. Danina still didn't know what was going on. My parents had no idea. And I said, I'm strong. I can handle this. No problem. And then a couple weeks later, I came home from work and that was it. I said, I can't take it anymore. I told Danina. And then we agreed that I would go see the doctor. Yeah. More we than me, but it was all good. So he immediately sent me here. And that hallway probably means nothing to anyone. To me, it means a little more. Now, if you don't recognize that hallway, you might recognize that building from either a ferry ride or being downtown Halifax. And if you know the building but you don't know what it is, it's Capital Health, mental health building. It's the Nova Scotia Hospital. I remember being a kid, being terrified of the place. Just driving down that area was always scary. And now, here I am, walking down that hallway with Danina, terrified, embarrassed, humbled, and then sitting in the waiting room, just down at the end of the left, for what seemed like hours, not knowing what was happening. I didn't know if I was there to stay. I didn't know if I'd be leaving. And then I got to talk to a couple strangers, a psychiatrist and an intern, and a nurse. I may have been there. I don't even remember. It's that fear that I had, that embarrassment, that humbling, that is now a reminder to me of just how low people can get, how low I could get. So that was then, but now there's still times when I struggle. Recently I got a massive promotion, big, to me, promotion at work that I never expected for 5, 10, 15 years down the road. And I got thrust into a world that I just don't know. I've got a huge team now of hundreds of staff. I'm responsible for so much more. I've got new deadlines and expectations that I just can't meet. So, being a guy, being stubborn, I try to take it all on myself. God's over here. This is my problem. He doesn't need to help me. And then I get so stressed, I feel like my bones are coming outside my body. My skin is so tight that it hurts. And then I think, okay, well, I've got God over here, I'll pull him back. But as I'm pulling him back, I'm thinking, does he want to come back to me? My little troubles? I just pushed him away. Why would he want to come back to me? It's my own struggles, and I should have to deal with it, is the way I figure it. So that's my story. But I guess the bottom line for all of us is that we all feel stress, and we all have struggles. But the truth is, Nothing about life is easy. There's fear, anxiety, depression, even perfectionism, guilt, regret. Everybody has a million different kinds of worries that we don't even know about. We all have problems of one type or another, and what you might see as a little annoyance to me can totally overwhelm or consume someone. You never know what's going on in someone's head. But it's how we deal with these struggles that what makes us different. And many of us are even bothered or crippled in some way by addictions like gambling or alcohol or drug addiction, pornography, eating disorders, pride, low self-esteem. Big one is people-pleasing and trying to impress others. Even suicide or self-harm. I could go on for hours with them. Now, you yourself might not be struggling with these exact issues, but chances are pretty good that if not now, maybe in the past, or sometime in the future, something, some problem, some issue, there'll be some struggle you have that will try to take over. What we need to be set free, but we just can't seem to do it alone. Please think about that this morning. Thank you.
Whoever said life would be easy, whoever said that was a liar. So if there's somebody in your life who has told you that life would be easy, they're wrong. I think what Sean has done this morning is a good example of that. I remember the first time that I ever spoke in front of a congregation, and I'm at the back of the church, I'm in sheer panic. And I walk by the chair of the board, and he looks at me, and he kind of stops, and he put his hands right up to me, and he says, "Are you okay?" and I said, yeah, I'm okay. He says, "Listen," he said, "I just want you to remember something." Because I didn't say anything to him at all. I said, except, "Yeah, I'm okay, I'm fine." He looked at me and he said, "You just need to remember something." I said, "What's that?" He says, "You're among friends." I went, yeah, that helped for about 3 seconds. Life throws things at us, and life is not always easy. There are all kinds of challenges that we face in life. And finding a way to see hope through the middle of that, knowing who and what to trust in, is not always easy. Whoever said life would be easy, they're wrong. Fear, anxiety, worry, depression, those things come at us, and as Sean said, we don't even always know where they're coming from. We don't even know why we're experiencing them some of the time. We feel worry, but we're not even sure what we're worried about at times. Many of us are bothered or sometimes even crippled by things that are a part of our lives. Gambling, drug addiction, alcohol, pornography, eating disorders, pride, low self-esteem, perfectionism, pleasing people. I mean, we're bothered by these things, but sometimes they actually immobilize us because we know we can't do it, but we feel like we should try. We all have sins of one type or another. We all have struggles that we face, that we have to deal with. And as Sean said, you might look at it and go, well, that might be a big problem to you. I don't understand why, because it's no problem for me. And what might be a big issue to some is not necessarily the same to somebody else. But we all have our own issues. We all have our own struggles. And there are times, most of you, if you're honest with yourself, you know that there have been times when you have experienced things that have really kind of wrapped you up. How do we deal with our struggles? So often what we do is we kind of elevate the problems, the issues, the struggles in our life. We elevate them up above God. We go, these are too big. They're mine. I'm stuck with them, and they're too big. They're even too big for God. So my focus is on my problem and not on the solution. But we need to be set free. We need to be set free from the things that kind of wrap us up. And we can't seem to do it alone. We try. Sometimes we give up trying. But we do try to kind of fix and solve our problems on our own. But it doesn't work. Or it works for just kind of a little short window of time, but then it's back again. Jesus' message to you, his message to me, his message to us is about freedom. He came to set us free. In John chapter 8, Jesus said to the people who believed in him, "You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." So if you hold to Jesus said, if you hold to what I'm teaching and you keep doing it, even when you don't feel like it, you just trust my word, you take me at my word, and you do what I say no matter what, you'll discover that what I say is the truth. And that truth will set you free. That truth will set you free from the things that have wrapped you up. People said back to him, "But we're descendants of Abraham. We've never been slaves to anyone." "What do you mean you will be set free?" They didn't understand that. They thought, "No, we've never been slaves. We've never been in bondage." They were thinking in earthly terms. He said, "No, it's something different than that." He said, "I tell you the truth. Everyone who sins is a slave of sin. A slave is not a permanent member of the family, but a son is a part of the family forever. So if the Son sets you free, you are really free." If Jesus sets you free, you really are free. That's the message. So no matter what you think, no matter what you've experienced in your past, whatever has happened, when Jesus says, "I came to set you free," and I take him at his word, I'm free. Freedom can be mine. Freedom from what? Freedom from sin. Does it mean that I will never sin? No, it's freedom from bondage to sin, from slavery to sin. Yes, I can be free. Free to enjoy God, free to enjoy his family, free to enjoy my spiritual family. It's one of the great blessings in life. You know, for those of you who invited Christ into your life, you're in family. He's given you a brand new family. Kind of like your own family, you know, you kind of go, "Well, yeah, I didn't get to pick them." And if I had, I probably wouldn't have picked that one or that one or that one or that one. And maybe some of them might say, "Well, I wouldn't have picked you either." And then you kind of look around your spiritual family and, you know, maybe you kind of think some of the same things, but it's different. Because it's the Spirit of Christ. He says, "I've adopted you into my family." It's Rick Warren said in his book, The Purpose-Driven Life, he says it's God's forever family. Think about that one. So when we as pastors and elders and leaders say to you, you know, it's important that you learn to get along now. Why? Because you're going to spend eternity with each other. This is a good time just to try and get those relationships straight. And we talk about unity, and that's really what we're talking about. To be united with Christ and united with your spiritual family. It's vital. Freedom is found when God's in charge. Freedom is found under God's authority. When God is leading, when God's in charge, that gives freedom to me. That doesn't sound right. Wouldn't it be freedom if I was in charge? Isn't that what we say? Isn't that the way we act? Freedom is really when I get to call the shots, when I get to pick what I do and when I do it and where I do it and who I do it with. That's when freedom is there, right? When I'm in charge. The Bible says no. Jesus said freedom is when I'm in charge of your life. You think about it. Freedom from sin. One of my favorite verses in the entire Bible. I'm kind of like Sheldon. You know, Sheldon's got a favorite song for every day of the week. You know, I got a few favorite scriptures. This is definitely one of my favorites. And most of you, if you've sat with Rob or I any amount of time at all, you've heard this verse. If you've been to very many connection services, you've heard this verse. It's found in Romans chapter 8. So now, referring to people who've committed their lives to Christ, referring to people who said, you know, I want God, it's your life. I've given my life back to you. You're in charge. It's your life. So now for those people, there is now no, what? Condemnation. There's no condemnation. There's no one saying, you did this wrong, you should feel bad about this. There's no condemnation. There's no God looking down from heaven going, look at you. He doesn't do that. There's no condemnation for those who belong to Christ Jesus. And because you belong to Him, the power of the life-giving Spirit has freed you from the power of sin that leads to death. That's freedom. It's not perfection. There's nobody here that will live a faultless life, after we invite Christ into our lives. Yes, we still do have our struggles. Yes, sometimes we stumble. But now our bent, our desire, our very nature leads us to do good. And even when we fail, God doesn't say, it's not like He's waiting for an opportunity to punish us. He loves us. There's no, what? Condemnation for you if you're in Christ Jesus. Freedom from condemnation. Freedom from sin's power. Freedom from judgment. I mean, that's good news, isn't it? Galatians chapter 5, verse 1 says, so Christ has truly set us free. Now make sure that you stay free and don't get tied up again in slavery to the law. The freedom that God has for us is freedom from this bondage to sin, from not only the bondage to sin, but this kind of slavery to the law. And what that really means is you can't do enough good to make up for all of the bad. You can't do it. So following the rules meticulously is not going to make up for the things that I've done wrong. It doesn't work that way. You can't do enough good. You can't be good enough. I can't be good enough. Colossians 3, 1-3 is probably, it's really kind of I think is the kind of the theme verse for this entire series. And Paul says this. He says, since then you have been raised with Christ, set your hearts on what? Things above. Set your heart, your affections, your desires, your passions, set your heart on things above. Think about the things of heaven, it says in another version. Think about the things of heaven, not of earth, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. Set your mind and your heart on what? Things above. Not on the things that trouble you day to day. Yes, they're still there. You ever had a problem, you kind of lay down in bed, you kind of go, oh, I hope when I wake up tomorrow morning, this problem is gone. And we wake up tomorrow morning and the problem is still there. And we set our minds, we set our hearts on all of these things, and we raise these things up above God and say, you know what? If nobody else, if anything's going to get done, it's going to be me. If anybody should be thinking about it, it's me. If anybody should worry about it, it should be me. And so that's what we do. And yet God says, I want you to raise your mind up to things above. I want you to set your heart, your passion, your desires on things not of this earth, on things of heaven, things of God. How can we live free? Look up. You want to know how you can live free? Look up. If you've ever played sports, or you've ever been on the playground at school, or and you hear this phrase, you're kind of like you're focused on one thing, and then somebody goes, heads up. What do? You look up. Sometimes you get the ball right in the face when you do that, but heads up. I think God's telling us, heads up. Take your mind and your heart, the things you think about, the things that consume you, the things that really capture all of your time and your energy and your attention, and look up. Heads up. Problem with fear, worry, depression, anxiety, all of those things. I mean, it's like when things are not the way that I want them, when things are not the way that I like them, then I begin to doubt. I do. I begin to doubt. I begin to question God. When things aren't going the way that I want them to, the way that I would like them to, my default almost, our default is almost that we say, oh, well, obviously, God really can't be who He says He is. And then we start to question who God really is. And the real root problem for us, the real root problem is trust. You ever hear this? It's such a battered phrase in our day. I almost hesitate to use it, but you hear people say, well, you have trust issues. Kind of annoys me. But we do. We have trust issues. Trusting or not trusting God, that's really the issue. When it comes to all of the struggles in my life, trusting God or not trusting God is the issue. And when I struggle with not trusting God, there are doubts, there are questions. I allow my fears to take control. My anxieties, my worries, that's what takes control instead of trusting in God. It doesn't mean that I see the answer. It means that I trust that God has the answer. It means that I trust that God cares about me. He cares about my circumstances. He cares about my situation. He cares about my life. It's trusting that that's what God does. It's trusting that God can, will, want to help me. That He cares enough to do that. You know, the Israelites, we like to pick on them because it's not us. It's always easier to kind of pick on somebody, especially if they're not even in your generation. they're way back. You kind of go, and there were times when the Israelites, they really did remember what God did. And they praised Him and they thanked Him. And remembering what God did in the past helped them to trust God in the present. In Psalm 22:45, 4-5, it says, our ancestors trusted in you, meaning God, and you rescued them. They cried out to you and were saved, and they trusted in you and were never disgraced. Isaiah says, see, God has come to save me. I will trust in Him and not be afraid. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has given me victory. So there were times when they remembered. And it helped them in the present. When they remembered that God was faithful in the past, they go, yeah, well, I can probably trust Him in the present. There were lots of times that they didn't remember. They just didn't remember. Somehow they had forgotten, they had blocked out. I don't know what it was, but they just weren't focused on all the things that God had done in the past. So they started to worry and be anxious. And then when God sent people to kind of draw them back to Himself, He sent the prophets. What happened to them? Most of them. It was like a really deadly job description. If you want a job description that's like, you go tell everybody that they're wrong and be a spokesman for God, and the end result of what you do may cost you your life. How many people would stand in line for that job description? Jesus, referring to them, says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who kill the prophets and stone those who are sent to you. Jesus knew it. He said, all the prophets that God sent to you, you killed them. You ignored them, you fought against them, and eventually, if they kept talking, you killed them. Trusting that freedom, real freedom, is found under God's authority. That's the goal. Trusting that if I surrender my life to God, if I give Him control of my life, that's where freedom, true freedom, maximum freedom is really found, when He's in charge. Another one of my favorite passages in the Bible is found in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek His will in all you do, and He will show you the path to take. So as you say, God, today, tomorrow, today, you are in charge. You give God control of your life. In every area of your life, He says, that my promise is, I'll set you straight. I'll point you straight. I'll show you the right path to take. As my trust in God grows bigger, then my fears, my struggles, the fear, the anxiety, the worry, all of the other things that sometimes capture me, my unhealthy dependencies, whether it's food or drugs or pornography or perfectionism or pleasing people, whatever it is for us. As my trust in God grows bigger, somehow the desire for those things gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And I start to overcome. Overcoming is actually, it's like a journey. It's a process. Experiencing victory over sin or even just understanding who God is and allowing Him to lead my life, that's a process. And so Sean and I were talking on the phone and thought, well, how can we how can we best illustrate that? And Sean, he had a really good idea. Sean, these guys, these are smart guys with big jobs, they have all kinds of good ideas. That's how they get to where they are. And so then I just try and hang around with them, and I talk to them and learn all kinds of things. Sean said, what we really need is like a kind of a life illustration. Like is there a picture or a story of a life where you can kind of see this maybe just a little bit in action? Not the end result necessarily, but just see it in action. And after we talked about it for a couple of minutes, I said, hey, Sean, why don't we use you? So that's what we're going to do. And so I said, Sean, here's a couple of questions I'd like you to think about. Come on up, Sean. I'd like you to think about these questions and how they relate to your life, and not only where you are, but kind of where you've been and maybe where you see yourself going. So I asked him, I said, Sean, when did you become a believer? And how have things been going for you since you started following Jesus?
All right. I became a believer early in 2009, so just about 3.5 years ago. And I would say things have been exponentially better. I thought about this morning, and the two things that really are different for me is back in the day, if I lost something or forgot something, that would just totally take over my thoughts until it was found. If I lost my car keys or a piece of paper, everything else stopped, and that's all I could focus on for days until I found them. Now, I still have a little bit issue, but at least I can leave and go to work or do whatever instead of just be constantly focused on that. Mm-hmm. The other one is, before, if I thought I had wronged someone or said something wrong to someone, or if I did something, it would just eat me alive until I could get back to that person and make right. And heaven forbid, if it was something that I couldn't make right, mm-hmm. like if I had done something and there was no way to fix it, that would eat me alive for months. Mm-hmm. Now it's, okay, God, I've screwed up. Mm-hmm. Can you help me? I give it to you. And I trust that he'll help me out. Mm-hmm.
So what are the kinds of things you've done that have actually been a help to you?
Well, I don't like to admit it, but I've met with you a lot.
Nobody likes to admit that.
Exactly. I've met with Rob.
Very rarely do they do it publicly.
Exactly. And Gordon is great to meet with.
Wait, I think I have $5.
And I met with Rob, and we went through the spiritual side of what I was going through. I had met with a lot of therapists and psychiatrists before that, but it wasn't until I met with these guys and really looked at the spiritual side that I noticed changes started taking place. Mm-hmm. And the growth groups have been phenomenal with help. Mm-hmm. And just being a Christian means reading and potlucks. So that's all I do.
not in that order, yep. Right?
I put on 20 pounds in the last 2 years, and I'm sure it's all potluck.
That's not in your notes, Sean.
No, it isn't. No. And I do still take meds for anxiety because I find, especially in the fall, that they do take the edge off, that I'm able to get through a little easier. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but my goal is to eventually get off of those.
Okay. So your spiritual family, God, your faith, is there anything else that those things you found have been important? Like kind of as you kind of reflect back, and that's kind of what I did. I asked Sean, I said, I'd like you to just kind of reflect back about over the last, I guess, 5 or 6 years, and just, what is it, kind of a cumulative effect. Sometimes we don't really think about what it is that really has had an impact on our lives, but as you think about just your faith, your spiritual family, those kinds of things, what kind of help have they been? What kind of a support have they been in your life?
Well, I guess the big thing I've learned from a lot of people, and Ed's not here, but I've learned from Ed a lot, is don't lead with your head, but lead with your heart. Follow your faith, really think with your heart as opposed to just trying to make everything rational. What do you feel inside? Mm-hmm. And even conversations I've had with a lot of you guys, even Sheldon I talk to probably every day, but it could be months later, I'll remember something that someone said, and it has a lasting effect. Mm-hmm. So just every one of you have helped me. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, with the men's group that I've tried to bring together with the retreats and stuff, that's what I'm trying to do, is help other people get what I've got from all you people.
So at this stage of your faith journey, what does the future look like? Because for those of you who can remember what Sean was talking about at the beginning, this is an important question. What is your as you look at your future, what is that perspective in your life now?
Well, I guess that it exists. I look forward to growing old, retiring with Danina, seeing the kids grow up. I can not picture or foresee the future, but I know if God willing, I'll be there. And I'll be able to see those milestones and help people. Life's not just about my job.
Thanks, Sean. The word that Sean actually said to me when I asked him this question on the phone was, I asked him, about the future, and he said, there's actually hope. I actually now have hope, not only in the future, but that I will even have a future. There's hope for me in the future. And oftentimes when we get caught up in all of our struggles and all this stuff that's going on in our lives, what we have a hard time seeing is hope. We feel hopeless. Things are never going to change. I'm never going to change. My situation is never going to change. But for you, if you're at the point in your life where you're going, I'm still not totally convinced that a relationship with God is what I need, I just want to encourage you to explore that. Because the hope that when you talk to Sean or when you talk to any other believer in Christ, the hope that you will hear, what you'll hear from people, is the hope is found really it's in Jesus. It's not a thing. It's not stuff. It's Him. It's a person. In Colossians 1:27, it says, it's Christ in you. That's your hope. It's Christ in you. That's the hope of glory. That's your hope for the future. The struggles. Everybody has them. Jesus said, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace, but in this world you will have trouble. You will have struggles. You will come up against things that you won't have any idea what to do. And Jesus said, I want you to look to me first. Because He is actually above our problems. He sees the big picture. He has the big picture all mapped out for you and for me. So He wants us to focus on Him and to trust Him. It's a walk of faith. It's an adventure. I'm in the world, but Jesus is in me. That's my hope. And if Jesus is in you, if you've invited Him into your life, then that's your hope. If you haven't, I want to encourage you to explore that. That's why we exist as a church. That's why Phase 1 growth groups exist. That's why there are people here who would love to talk to you about their faith. The good news is that freedom, real freedom, is yours to be had. No matter what barriers, no matter what struggles you're going through, freedom is there for you to have. Maximum freedom is found under God's authority. Maximum freedom is found when God's in charge. In Psalm 91, verses 1 to 2 and 14 to 15, the psalmist says this, those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty. This I declare about the Lord. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust Him. The Lord says, I will rescue those who love me. I will rescue those who love me. If you take Him at His word, and you respond to His love in love so that He is yours and you are His, He says, I will. That's part of the deal. His promise is, I will rescue you. I will protect those who trust in my name. When they call on me, I will answer. We're family. We're adopted into His family. When we call on Him, any parent worth their salt, they will respond to their children. I was thinking about what Sean was saying about his life looking ahead, and the one thing he didn't say was he's looking forward to being a grandfather. But But, that's part of it. You see, there's the eyes right there. Didn't want to think about that. But God says, I will protect you. I'll watch over you. I'll lead you. I'll guide you. I'll give you whatever you need. I'll rescue you. When they call on me, I will answer. I will be with them. I will be with you, he says, in trouble. No matter what you go through, his promises, he says, I will be with you. I will rescue and honor them. See, God first. Instead of having my struggles above God, instead of raising them so that they consume my life, I raise God above my struggles and he consumes my life. And what happens is I experience peace, joy, freedom. When God is first, that's what happens in my life. And when he's not first, peace and the joy and the freedom somehow disappear. So I want to encourage you as you think about this. If there's an area in your life you'd say, you know what, I have this struggle, and it's what consumes my thinking time, it's what consumes my energy, it's what consumes my planning. If you have one of those struggles, I want to encourage you to put God first in that. Let him take charge of it, and you trust him that he will care for you. He'll intervene in your situation. He will listen and he'll rescue you. And no matter what you go through, he'll go through it with you. So if there's one area that you would say, that's the one, that's the struggle, I want to encourage you to consider giving that to God. If there's an area of sin in your life where you say, I'm choosing what I know is wrong and what God tells me is wrong above what he says to do, I want to encourage you. Give that to him. And when you place him first, everything is in its right order. And the peace and the joy that somehow seems missing when I'm caught up in my struggles and when I'm caught up in sin, it resurfaces in my life. So I want to encourage you. As you choose God first, you are choosing peace, joy, freedom, a purpose-filled life. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. You have your connection card, and I want to encourage you just to, if there's something that God's been speaking to your heart that you say, I really need to make a decision, a choice in relation to what we've been talking about today, I want to encourage you to take that step of faith, courage. Let us know if you want us to maybe just remind you midweek and ask how it's going. If there's a prayer concern in your life, we want to encourage you to share it with us. We do care about your prayer concerns. If God is saying, I really want you to act, there's something I want you to do, I want to encourage you to obey him. Because true freedom, maximum freedom, is found when God's in charge of my life.